DeAndre Swift last year had 2 more yards per carry before contact than Saquon Barkley did with the Giants.
Welcome into the NFL on Fox podcast. I am your host, Dave Helman, and football is back. Yeah, maybe that sounds repetitive. The show's been back. We played the Hall of Fame game last week. Yeah, we didn't finish it, but we played it. Bear with me, okay? Just allow me to be excited because preseason football begins tonight. We've got games all weekend. When you turn on your TV this weekend, it should be easy for you to find NFL football. And that counts for something, damn it. We're back up. Put the word out. We're going to have things to react to, players to watch, rookies to know, sleepers for your fantasy team. It all starts tonight. And yeah, in 2 weeks, you can remind me that I said this when we're tired of preseason football. It's going to come. I know. But right now, we're thirsty people crawling through the desert. We need football, and we got it. We can do that later. Once we've played a couple games, once we've seen some starters, once the ball caps come on, then we can turn our attention toward week 1, and that'll be exciting too. But right now, we're going to start to answer some questions about 2024. I can't wait, if you can't tell. Let's get into it. If you're new, thank you for tuning in. Please make sure you subscribe on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. We're going to be coming at you all season long. You know the social handles too, at NFL on Fox Pod. Tell your friends, tell your family, your coworkers. Get ready to go through the whole 2024 season with us. And like I said, even if I regret saying this now, it does technically start tonight. Or if I regret saying it later, you know what I mean. Can you tell I'm excited? All right. Before we do that, we are going to preview week 1 of the preseason. We're going to get to that. Few names to know. Some legitimately big names will be playing in their preseason openers this weekend. So we'll take you through that. But first, some big stuff happening in the most visible division in the NFL. Yeah, I didn't say successful. I didn't say toughest. Definitely the most visible, though. The NFC East. A wild week in East Rutherford, New Jersey, as the New York Giants got after it with tonight's preseason opponent, the Detroit Lions. Some big names turning heads in New York. Also, fun stuff happening in Washington and Philadelphia. And who would we be if we didn't check in on what's going on with the Dallas Cowboys? Nobody better to help us do that. Our good buddy, Fox Sports reporter Ralph Vacchiano, dropped by the show. Going to talk about all things NFC East, check in on how camp is going for all of those teams before we dive in to week 1 of the preseason. All right, Ralph, it's good to be back with you. And I'm going to start with what feels like some deja vu happening at New York Giants camp, because a young, talented, brash LSU receiver has stepped onto the field in East Rutherford, and it seems like he's turning heads. It's obviously Malik Nabers this year, not Odell Beckham Jr., but between the circus catches I'm seeing on social media, the dust up with Lion safety Kirby Joseph that looks like it cost both teams a lot of money. I don't know. It just seems like Malik Nabers he's not just the talk of Giants camp. He's one of the focal points of the early part of this preseason so far.
He's the center of everything, and he's starting to get some national attention too. I've seen a few people say he's, if not a favorite, certainly a good possibility for offensive rookie of the year. And, in general, I don't like to get too overexcited by preseason things, and certainly not by things that happen in practice. But I can say that the Giants have not had a receiver like him doing the things that he does for a long, long time. There's just something about the separation that he gets, the speed he shows, the crisp routes he runs, the body control, his hands, the circus catches, the easy catches, the explosion after the catch. It is all very much Odell Beckham-like. Now, Odell Beckham was hurt as a rookie in training camp, so we didn't get to see him until the games. But, if Nabers can do any of this during games, that's going to be the comparison, because when Odell Beckham was traded away by the Giants, they never replaced him. They tried with the Golden Tates and the Kenny Galladays and Darius Slayton and a whole bunch of other guys who would be the fourth receiver on most teams. They haven't had that number one guy. I'd argue they haven't even had a legitimate number two guy. Well, they had Sterling Shepard for a while, but he was often hurt. But certainly not a true number one. And that's what Malik Nabers looks like right now. And it really could be transformational to this offense if the rest of it is what they hope it will be.
Let me ask you this. Obviously, fans are going to get excited when they see a guy making plays like this, and media as well, because it's fun for us to talk about too. You've covered the Giants for a long, long time. You got a lot of relationships in that building. What kind of sense do you get from the Giants themselves about not just having a talented player, and yeah, maybe I'm overreacting a little bit, but you just see some of the, the confidence. Like I said, he's a brash player. If he delivers on this hype, he does seem like the type of guy that can be transformational for an offense that, like you said, they just haven't had a guy like this in a while. Do you get the sense that the Giants themselves are kind of feeling that?
Well, there's no question. The players all know that he's special and he's doing things that they haven't seen anyone do on this team in a long time. In the organization, obviously they've had some turnover in recent years, but there are people who've been there since the Odell Beckham days, and they do talk about him in ways that they rarely talk about a player. They talk about Saquon Barkley like that in his early days, about how explosive and special he could be and the things he could do. But as far as a receiver goes, it definitely goes back to Odell Beckham. They've had receivers that they liked, but they would talk in specifics about them. When they signed Kenny Golladay, which was obviously a terrible signing, but when they had hope for him, it was all about his size and contested catches. Darius Slayton, they thought was a steal of a receiver in the late round, but they never talked about him as special. Jalen Hyde, they drafted in the third round last year. They talk about his speed and his downfield threat. It's all, little things. With Malik Nabers, it's everything. It's we can get the ball to this guy anywhere on the field, and then look what he can do. Look what, the way he can catch the ball in traffic, and then he's gone. Look at the way he can fight defensive backs for the ball. They just love everything about him. And I think that, again, I don't want to overreact to practice, but if you watch practice, they sure are making him a focal point in their offense. He gets the ball more than any other receiver. He catches it almost every time, moves around a lot, going from different positions. I think they are setting up to use him a lot. And if, again, they believe that he's going to be a star.
This is the great thing about football, because I think the overall, the general sentiment about the Giants heading into this year, I don't think there are a lot of people with high hopes. But you get out to training camp, you see Nabers doing this, and you think, all right, I mean, if Nabers can hit, Andrew Thomas at left tackle's coming back from an injury-plagued season, maybe John Runyon and Jermaine Illuminor can do their thing on the offensive line, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, maybe Daniel Jones actually has something to work with here, which is what I want to get to next, Ralph, because you wrote a very interesting story for Fox Sports. And I'll be honest, it wasn't something that I had considered. I'll let you explain it, but the basic gist is, considering where quarterback contracts are at this point, maybe $40 million for Daniel Jones can be a little bit of a bargain for the New York Giants.
Right. And I appreciate you reading the article, because if you just read the headline and you see Daniel Jones contract bargain, you then think I'm an idiot, and you would be right to probably think that. But the details in this are what matter. He was one of the highest paid players in the NFL when he signed that $160 million contract. He's now the 14th highest paid quarterback, and Dak Prescott is obviously going to jump by him, and there are others in the next couple of years who are going to jump by him. Quarterbacks now, good ones, are paid $50 million regularly. $40 million a year is the going rate for a mediocre quarterback. And that's what Daniel Jones was when he earned the contract in 2022. He led the Giants to the playoffs. He only threw for about 3,200 yards. I think he had 15 or 16 touchdown passes, ran for 700 or so yards too, and that added to his ability. But he wasn't a 4,000-yard passer, wasn't throwing for 30 touchdowns. We don't know if he's capable of that. He was mediocre, and that's the way he's paid. Now, the Giants are totally banking on the fact that he was mediocre with a really crummy cast around him, a bad offensive line that topped out at mediocre late in the year. Terrible receivers, one of the worst receiving cores in the league that he found a way to maximize. You get him a better offensive line with actual protection. You keep him healthy. They got him, I think, a decent running back in Devin Singletary. He's not Saquon Barkley, but he's good. and you get him that number one receiver that they now believe they have, they think that Daniel Jones can get above that mediocre level. And that's my argument, is that if he gets above that mediocre level, the contract's going to look like a steal. I mean, if he's a 9-win quarterback and throws for 3,500 yards, he's underpaid by today's standards, as ridiculous as that sounds.
It does sound ridiculous. And that's, like I said, I mean, I'll be honest. I saw the headline and I was like, all right, let's see what Ralph is talking about here. But then you read it and yeah, like it's a commentary, I think, on how crazy the quarterback market has gotten. That, yeah, I mean, what Daniel Jones did in 2022 is probably worth $40 million in 2024, given that we've got 5 or 6 guys making north of $50 million. Dak's going to be making 60 at some point here. My question for you is this, and I'm sorry, it's a little unfair because I don't think there's an answer, but the thing with Daniel Jones that makes this also interesting is obviously the Giants are positioned to move on from him in 2025, so long as he doesn't get hurt. There's no more guarantees on his contract. There's no reason they can't have a new starter next year. So with that in mind, what do you think Daniel Jones would have to do for the Giants to decide, no, we don't need to move on, we're good with DJ as our guy?
Well, I think the biggest thing is health. He has to stay healthy, because that's the reason. It wasn't ability that caused him to look at quarterbacks in the draft and try to trade up to the 3rd pick for Drake May. It was worries about his health, the 2 neck injuries in 3 seasons. And he's coming back from a torn ACL, which he looks great in practice, but we have to see that in the game before you know that he's fully back to the two-way quarterback that he was. If he stays healthy, as far as they're concerned, the excuses are gone. They believe the line is fixed. They believe he's got a number one receiver. Obviously, guys can get hurt and that could change the equation. But if those 2 things are actually in place, they need to see some improvement over where he was in 2022. It can't be another 3,200-yard, 15 touchdown season, even if they win a lot. They're going to want to see him start to approach those elite numbers, get to 3,800 yards, throw 22, 23 touchdowns, show that the arrow is now really pointing up, even from 2022. And then if he's healthy and he does that, they'll say, okay, well, we can postpone the decision to move on from him. Let's give him another year and see what that's about before his contract is actually up. But, if he's still mediocre, if he's hurt, and it'll depend obviously on where they are in the draft, I could see them diving right back into that quarterback search next year, because, they're not 100% sold on him for the future. They do believe in his ability, but there are things they need to see.
Yeah, I think the stat I saw that I think encapsulates it is, even in 2022, when he was decent, we'll say, Daniel Jones was 25th in yards per attempt, and just not pushing the ball downfield the way that you need from a franchise quarterback. So if he can bump those numbers and get the Giants back into the wild card race, maybe I'll start to believe. But it's just a little tempting to know how easy it would be for the Giants to move on after this year. It's just tempting to speculate about the future.
And by the way, I know that that's a damning stat, and it's certainly not good on Daniel Jones' resume, but I always point to the receivers there too. I mean, that's a shared
Very true.
stat. There was not a lot of yards after the catch. There was not a lot of separation. He didn't have that game breaker. You get that one guy that, Jamar Chase, that Justin Jefferson, the Odell Beckham, CeeDee Lamb, name any number one receiver in the league. You give that to him, that number goes up just by the fact that they can escape and have big games. And, even if Saquon Barkley had been the receiver he was as a rookie, that could have helped him. So again, we're hoping at a lot of things. And I think the Giants are looking at this thinking, well, if everything goes right, it can be this, but that's where they are right now. If they have those things in place, they see a very easy way for Daniel Jones' numbers to get to a higher level. And then they can start to judge, not are we going to keep him, but, how long are we going to keep him? What is he really worth in the next deal if we go that far? Is he our guy for 10 years or is he our guy for 2 years? Those are the kind of decisions that they'll need to make. But they've hopefully, at least from their end, have gotten rid of all the excuses, and now we'll see really what he can do.
I feel contractually obligated to point out all of those game-breaking receivers you named are from Louisiana. Malik Nabers, also from Louisiana. So I know we shouldn't buy into the hype too early, but I don't know. Go pull up some Malik Nabers catches on social media and tell me you don't get a little excited. So Very interested to see where this goes with the Giants. Let's take it further down the interstate a little bit to Philadelphia. Maybe I'm missing it. And I know it's one of the most hyped signings of the offseason, but since the Eagles have gotten into practice, I haven't seen or heard as much as I thought I would about Saquon Barkley. What can you tell me about what this Eagles offense looks like and what we should expect for Saquon here in his first year in Philadelphia?
Yeah, I went down there for the first few days of training camp, and he's already one of the biggest stars, as far as the fans are concerned, and a lot of talk about what he can do. Training camp's tough for running backs because there's not a lot of contact for the most part, so you don't really get to see them in action. What I can tell you is, there's a lot of hype around him, around the players on the offensive side of the ball, and just how not only how he might be able to fulfill his potential running behind an actual offensive line for the first time in his career, because there were some atrocious lines that he had to battle behind with the Giants. But also having a team with two number one receivers and a star receiving tight end to really stretch the field and take the defense's focus away from him. He's not going to face constant 8-man fronts because nobody cares about the receivers. The defense is going to worry about A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, and all of a sudden, Barkley's going to have holes to run through. The big stat I keep focusing on is that DeAndre Swift last year had 2 more yards per carry before contact than Saquon Barkley did with the Giants. That's, 2 more yards per carry on 250 carries. Right off the bat, you can see where his numbers could possibly go this year if he gets that attempt. Plus, they're also going to use him as a receiver in ways that the Giants didn't necessarily use, at least from what we were able to see in training camp. So it's just another dimension of the Eagles offense. And, I think they're excited to actually have that weapon in the backfield that people really fear. DeAndre Swift, again, was good, but it wasn't a guy that defenses were really keeping their eye on. They were worried about the receivers. Now it's sort of pick your poison. And I think the Eagles think that can bring their offense back to where it was in their Super Bowl year.
I do agree that Barkley is a better player than DeAndre Swift, but it feels like only yesterday that you and I were doing this podcast, scratching our heads trying to figure out why the Eagles kept forgetting DeAndre Swift was on their team down the stretch of the season. Kellen Moore is obviously in Philly now, has a lot of experience with a good running game from his time in Dallas. I guess, and I think that's the $1 million question for the Eagles, is how well Moore can utilize all this talent, how well it all meshes together. But I mean, do you trust that he can get? I mean, there's so much talent. I would imagine he's going to get the most out of them, but I guess in a balanced way that features everybody the way they need to.
It's always the challenge, right? When you got so many stars, they all want the ball. Is somebody going to be unhappy? I think the Eagles have done a pretty good job over the last couple of years of splitting up A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and making sure they get enough balls to have not only big seasons, but, to keep them, for the most part, from complaining. Obviously running back hasn't been as big a focus for them, but I think Saquon Barkley will get the ball enough. And, yeah, I do trust Kellen Moore. I have a lot of respect for what he did, especially in Dallas. Obviously, he didn't have a great year last year with the Chargers, but his years in Dallas were terrific as making sure that it was a diverse offense. It was hard to stop, especially, he got his quarterback clicking well. The receivers, running backs, all were a part of it. So I don't think there'll be any issues. I also think that a lot of ways after last year where, Brian Johnson struggled calling the plays, there's a lot of tension with Nick Sirianni being a little too heavy-handed in the offense. I think that there'll be a lot of anticipation of something new, a new voice coming in from the outside, and Sirianni taking a step back and really letting Kellen Moore run the show on offense. I think that's going to be reinvigorating for the guys there too. So, I do think, there's always the possibility that somebody, A.J. Brown maybe, gets a little upset at some point if he's not getting the work that he's used to. But as long as they're winning, that usually holds off any problems.
It's funny. I think around this time of year, we're typically fixated on like, what holes do you have on the roster? Where are you thin? Where do you have injuries? Are you good enough? For the Eagles, all that stuff you're talking about, like, for lack of a better word, the vibes just feel like the main variable for Philadelphia. There's reports coming out as recently as this week about how well Nick Sirianni was getting along with Jalen Hurts by the end of last year. Tension behind the scenes. It spilled over into the public domain a lot. And I guess I just wonder how fragile all of this might feel. Because, like, by talent alone, the Eagles look like a Super Bowl team. It really just feels like it's going to be about how well all of this meshes behind the scenes and in the meeting rooms.
I think that's huge. And you can't really describe what the vibes are, and it's a hard thing to bet on necessarily. But my goodness, how many times did we do the podcast last year during their 10-1 start where the topic was there's something wrong with the Eagles? Like, there's just something doesn't feel right about this team. They're winning games. Sometimes they're winning convincingly, but it's just off somehow. And then it all fell apart at the end. Their vibe, some of them have talked about it a little bit in camp about how, they weren't as happy. They were still worried about the Super Bowl loss. The offense obviously was having issues. That's all hindsight. But in real time, last season, it was clear something was not right with that team. And of course, it showed in the end. I don't get that sense in training camp. It's like spring training baseball that everybody's happy. Everybody's looking forward to the new year and whatever. But once you've sort of bottomed out the way they did, to get a new, look, a new attitude, some new players, that can be reinvigorating. And especially when you've got the talent to back it up, I can see why it would not only change their outlook, but, change their entire season. If they get off to a fast start, their vibes are going to be through the roof.
Yeah, that's a really great point, especially, if you manage to get a primetime win in Brazil over Green Bay. I think that could do wonders for the vibes in Philly. I promise I'm not forgetting about the Commanders. We'll get to them in a minute, but really quickly, just thinking about vibes, I mean, really, that's my primary question with the Dallas Cowboys right now is I really don't have any doubt that CeeDee Lamb is going to sign a deal making him one of the highest paid receivers in football eventually. My question is, and you've covered the NFL for a long time, at what point does it start to become a problem that it hasn't been done? From a vibe standpoint, and also just the chemistry that you want from your team. I mean, CeeDee Lamb is not at camp. I don't think that's a big deal on July 31st. But on like August 15th, it starts to feel like it's a big deal. So it really feels like we're getting to the point where something needs to happen.
I'll be honest. I've seen enough of these over the years that, especially for a veteran player who's respected on his team, if he shows up before week one, it erases a lot of the ill will from during the summer. As long as he's in shape, as long as he doesn't get off to a slow start. I mean, if he shows up before week one and then doesn't have a catch for 3 weeks, obviously it's a huge issue. But, if he shows up, say, August 31st and the week one game, he has 10 catches for 120 yards, no one cares what happened in the summer. So it'll become an issue for the media. It'll become an issue for the fans. It'll be something that, it's not like Jerry Jones hides from a camera. He's going to be asked about it every day in August until it's done. And that can be a distraction. But, if I'm the Cowboys, the big worry for me would be just getting him back in time for that opener, and hope then, that he has time to get completely into shape, completely on board with his quarterback, and, that they don't start 0-3 because the chemistry's off between Prescott and Lamb.
It's very fair. And to be fair to them, I guess, I mean, it feels like the season's right around the corner with how long we've already been in camp. Opening day is still a little more than a month away, technically. So you're right. There is a lot of time, but man, especially being out here on the West Coast, so close to Cowboys camp, each day that goes by, you're just like, man, they're only going to have so many of these opportunities to get out here in pads before they go back and start getting ready for the season. So, like I said, I do still think there's time, but I mean, you'd like to see CD in uniform again within the next week or two at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, I would too, just because, again, you want to avoid those distractions and you want to avoid those questions and start building those vibes that we talked about. But again, you not even forget holdouts. How many guys have you seen that were injured during training camp and, suddenly showed back up for week one? It's sort of the same thing. He doesn't get to practice. He doesn't need to learn the playbook. He doesn't, you hope he has a chemistry with Dak Prescott. But the bigger thing, and this is an overarching thing with the Cowboys, is always the questions, the distraction, the media attention. What is Jerry Jones going to say when he does his fourth interview of the week and is asked about CeeDee Lamb? Is he going to be continually asked about how can you be all in if you haven't gotten this guy here yet? That's an issue for the Cowboys, but that's honestly one that they're going to have to deal with all year long unless they sign Dak Prescott sooner than later. That's going to turn to, when are you going to get it done? Is he going to be a free agent? They've got a head coach on an expiring contract. You got Micah Parsons waiting in line. They just have all of these distractions around them and people who are not afraid to talk about it, which is good for us, but not necessarily good for avoiding distractions. And, you just wonder if at some point that's going to feel overwhelming. Probably not if they're winning, but again, slow start, 3-game losing streak. That's when all of these things really pile on, and that's when it really becomes a problem.
It's the Dallas Cowboys. If all of that drama got resolved, they'd find something new to be in the headlines for. That's just kind of the way it works. Last but definitely not least, I wanted to spin. We should give a fair shake to this because I truly feel like Jayden Daniels, for being a number 2 overall pick, is flying well under the radar. I think Caleb Williams in Chicago is eating up a lot of that oxygen, understandably so. And you got the Eagles right up the road from Washington. Quote jumped out to me this week where, longtime veteran tight end Zach Ertz is in Washington this year. And he said recently that, a lot of times when you see a rookie quarterback, you think this guy's going to be good. Jayden Daniels is good right now. And coming from a guy like Zach Ertz, that carries a lot of weight with me. What have you heard about what we're seeing from Jayden Daniels at camp in DC?
Well, nothing but good things. We've heard Dan Quinn talk recently about how Jayden Daniels has exceeded any expectations he's had. I've talked to a few people down in and around the Commanders, and, they just love everything that he's done. And not just, we knew he had the ability, right? It's the leadership, the way he's gotten guys to gravitate towards him, which isn't always easy for a rookie quarterback. The way he picked up the playbook, this is a big deal for the Commanders after what they've been through in recent years, but helping to build the attitude of the locker room and the work ethic and the camaraderie among the players. It's all just, they are giddy about everything about him. We talked about this with Malik Nabers, and I want to say the same thing, that I don't want to get overexcited by things in preseason, especially in practice. I am really excited to see him Saturday against the Jets in his first preseason game, just to get a taste of what he can do. But, they really are optimistic that, he's not going to be the kind of rookie that struggles all year long, that they just think, okay, well, this is just a learning year. He may not come out and be CJ Stroud right off the bat and carry his team to the playoffs, but they think that, he's going to show people that he was more ready than he got credit for in the draft. And that, if they build the right team around him, that their future is in really good hands.
I think we talk about it a lot with Caleb Williams, and I think what the Bears have done for Caleb is better than what's going on in Washington. I still think new general manager Adam Peters deserves so much credit. This is a far better supporting cast than I think you would expect for a guy that was drafted number 2 overall. I'm a little worried about the offensive line, but the receiver duo of Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson is wonderful. Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson Jr. give you a nice 1-2 combo at running back. Zach Ertz is there. I'm not trying to sell anybody that Zach Ertz is still an all-pro, but this is a guy who's played a lot of NFL football who can help your young quarterback. Like I said, for a guy that's on supposedly the second worst team in football, I don't think the offense really looks like that.
No, I agree. Look, they had $90 million in cap room to play with in the offseason, the most in the league. They brought in a ton of players. None of them were really stars. They're all good, serviceable players that can help build on what they already had. They had the receivers in place. Now they've got a running back who can help Brian Robinson and who can be a receiver out of the backfield. They have a little bit better offensive line, not a great offensive line, maybe not even a good enough offensive line, but I don't think it'll be atrocious the way it was last year. I think their defense is a little stronger, and that will help make it a little easier on Jayden Daniels. So, yeah, the cast around him is definitely better. I don't know that it's playoff ready. I don't know that, let's say that this all goes as planned and, in 3 years they're a contender. A lot of these guys might not be here. They've still got some building to do, but they've given their rookie quarterback a chance. They make sure that he's not surrounded by bad players. He's not surrounded by a lot of questionable talent. He's got some guys to make it work around him, to help him out and help him through his learning curve, which is, again, one of the reasons why they think that this could be a better rookie year than a lot of people expect. The offensive line, most definitely their biggest concern. They're hoping that Jayden Daniels' running ability and his ability for the off-schedule throws will sort of offset that a little bit. But it's always a concern when, you got to play in and you got to go through your progressions. But 2 seconds in, you're already running towards the sideline. That's not ideal for any quarterback. But he's got playmakers to work with. It's really just a better coaching staff than they had. I think it's just all there to set him up for at least marginal success as a rookie and to really kind of start that growth process to maybe they're, contending in a few years quicker than anybody thinks.
I love that point that, in a best case scenario, 3 years from now, if the Commanders are contenders, they'll look back and be like, man, I'm glad Austin Eckler and Zach Ertz were there in 2024 to help us get this thing off the ground. But we've moved on to, a higher, younger caliber of player by that point. I think, it's a good environment. It's good training wheels for a young quarterback to have. Right. And shout out to Dan Quinn for just telling us that Jayden's going to play. Like, in an age where NFL coaches don't want to do that ever, it's nice to know ahead of time that I can circle Saturday on the calendar and be like, yeah, Jayden Daniels is going to play the Jets. I'm really looking forward to it. Ralph,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I find it hard to believe the coaches will still hide those things for a preseason game, but you're exactly right. Oh. We knew he had to play. I'm thankful that Quinn could let me know so I could get to the game.
As somebody who has been tasked with trying to figure out who's playing in the preseason, I promise you, very few coaches are making it easy on us. So shout out to Dan Quinn for that. Enjoy the game if you're going. We'll have to check in with you about how he does. But Ralph, I really appreciate catching up with you, man. It was good talking to you.
My pleasure, Dave. Anytime.
Thanks again to Ralph Vacchiano for hopping on with some key training camp updates. As we alluded to, we can start worrying about something else now. It's time for the preseason. Training camp is 2 weeks in, and the preseason finally begins tonight. Starts Thursday, 2 games, Panthers, Patriots, and Lions, Giants Thursday evening, and then a full slate of games throughout the weekend. Not going to preview preseason games. Who cares? Teams are not game planning to win. They are evaluating players. So in that regard, it doesn't matter, but it is very exciting for getting a first look at new players, new schemes, new teams. Who's exciting you? Who are we getting a look at? Like I talked about with Ralph, the segment here is guys we're excited to see in the beginning of the preseason. I had a hell of a time. I'm going to be honest with you. Teams do not like to confirm or deny who will be playing or how much they will be playing. But as we head into the first batch of preseason games, this is an educated guess at some of the more exciting guys that will get some playing time to start things out. For starters, tonight, I'm sure you can find a way to watch it. It'll be on NFL Network. At some point, Drake May is going to get his first snaps with the New England Patriots against the Panthers. New England head coach Gerard Mayo did confirm that. I don't know if he starts. I don't know how many series he gets, but Drake May expected to play against the Carolina Panthers. So that is one thing. The next, we already teased with Ralph Vacchiano, but Dan Quinn did do me the solid of confirming Jayden Daniels is going to play Saturday against the New York Jets. And reading the tea leaves, I think Jayden Daniels is probably going to play a healthy amount this preseason. So you will see plenty of the number 2 overall pick. The Washington Commanders kicking off against the New York Jets at noon Eastern. I think that game's on NFL Plus. You might be at the mercy. NFL Plus, NFL Network. A lot of these games are going to be televised. I'm sure you can find a way to watch it, even if it's not on live in your area. Best believe my dorky self will be sat in front of the TV to watch Jayden get his preseason debut against the New York Jets. As long as I'm stumping for my LSU quarterbacks, not a rookie, but a very key member, a very key piece of these offseason storylines. Joe Burrow is going to start Saturday evening against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Buccaneers head coach Zach Taylor has made it pretty clear he thinks Burrow needs the snaps, be his first action in the preseason, really of his career. And coming off of the wrist injury, I think that makes plenty of sense. 2 names I'm going to throw out here, because remember, Jamar Chase sitting out of practice right now, having a hold in about his contract. I want to get a look at rookie Bengals wide receiver Jermaine Burton and second-year receiver Andre Iosivas. I think those are the primary competitors to be the third receiver in Cincinnati. Obviously, you got Chase, you got Higgins, but Burton and Iosivas, the primary candidates to replace Tyler Boyd as the third receiver in that offense. So in addition to seeing what Joe Burrow looks like, I'm tuning in to Bengals Buccaneers to see who's trying to step up and be that third starting receiver in Cincinnati. Mentioned Jayden Daniels, the number 1 overall pick. Not as clear with the Chicago Bears what's going on with Caleb Williams. It sounds like the Bears are dealing with some injuries on their offensive line. I think the health of the O-line is going to determine whether Caleb Williams plays on Saturday against the Buffalo Bills. I'm really hoping it's the case. Let's go, Bears offensive linemen. Get in the ice tub, get in the rehab room. Let's get Caleb Williams onto the field, even if it's only for a series or two. I'd love to see the guy finally get some NFL action. If he does play, I assume that means fellow rookie Rome Odunze is going to play as well. Maybe Odunze will even play without Caleb. We'll see. A lot of times starters are a package deal. You know, if one big name sits, they all do. But Rome Odunze is a rookie. So maybe a solid guess. You'll at least see him, even if Caleb Williams doesn't play. We will see. Down in Tennessee, again, I love teams that make things obvious. It sounds like Will Levis is going to get some playing time against the San Francisco 49ers, as well as at least some of the starters from the Tennessee offense. Obviously, so much riding on Will Levis as the Titans try to determine if he's their franchise guy. They spent $300 million this offseason, including 92 on number 0 there, Calvin Ridley, $92 million. Tyler Boyd, I mentioned him leaving Cincinnati. He's in Tennessee now. Tony Pollard, the offensive line is revamped. It all kind of rides on Will Levis. So what more reason do you need to tune in to see him go against San Francisco, get an early look at what he looks like? One last one, which I think is a bit surprising. You might remember Jordan Love just signed a $200 million+ contract. He's now a $50+ million quarterback. Guys like that often sit in the preseason, or at the very least, they wait. They'll play the second or the third game, maybe not the first. Sounds like Jordan Love's going to start against Cleveland this weekend. I believe that's another Saturday afternoon game. Green Bay playing the Cleveland Browns, and it sounds like Jordan Love is at least going to get a series or two. Hoping the best for everybody's health, but it's exciting. There's a little bit of a risk to playing in the preseason, but after the way he finished his first year as a starter, cannot wait to see what the Green Bay offense looks like, at least in a small dose. So that is what I am looking at in the first weekend of the preseason. I'm sure there will be some other additions. Teams will announce who's playing as we get closer to the weekend. You'll want to keep an eye on that, and we will be back next week to recap what all happens. There'll be games galore from Thursday to Sunday, plenty of stuff going on. We'll be back to talk about that, any other major updates, what else is going on in the NFL. That's what we do. Football's back, y'all. We are into the preseason. We are going to have football games on TV every weekend from now until February. Can I get an amen? If you're not subscribed to the show, you know what to do. Go find us on Spotify. Go find us on Apple Podcasts. You see the handle there on the screen at NFL on Fox Pod. You can find us on all the social platforms. We are gearing up for such a fun second season, and we will chat with y'all on the other side of the weekend. I appreciate it. Thanks again.